Stranger Things. It is a magnificent television series on Netflix released in 2016, and if you haven't heard of it by now, you probably don't have Netflix, but even if you don't, you might have already heard of it. It is a fantastic science fiction, horror, 80s teen flick mixture, and it's incredible. Now, I didn't actually watch it in 2016 when it came out, because unfortunately I kind of ignored it, and I want to kind of make this video in case you're one of those people like me that ignored it, because it's amazing. I should never have ignored it. It is absolutely incredible. It's a fantastic TV show, one of the best I've seen in many, many years. It takes place in Hawkins, Indiana in the early 1980s, and it has a very Haddonfield, Illinois kind of feel, this town, which is intentional because there are a ton of references to all kinds of things from 70s, 80s horror, sci-fi, action films that you can see in this. And it's about a group of children that come into contact with a girl named Eleven. She's named Eleven because she is part of a secret government experiment to create and manipulate telepathic and telekinetic children. It was started in the 1960s and 70s with some echoes of some very real-life CIA experiments with LSD that were done at the time that resulted in the birth of a number of special kids. One of these girls, Eleven, has telekinetic powers, and while they're using her as some sort of assassin to destroy Russian agents overseas, it's discovered that Eleven can tap into some sort of weird astral plane or other dimension, or this strange upside-down, as they call it, dimension that exists alongside ours, but is sort of just a part of it. It's dimensionally out of phase with our own.
This whole town, it's being invaded by the other world.
But we can enter it at certain points that were created when Al accidentally tore open a door between the two worlds. Now, this group of kids, led by Mike here, is very Goonies-like, and the adventures that they get into are very much like the Goonies. In fact, they actually have Sean Astin, who played the main character of the Goonies, who was also named Michael. He actually shows up in the second season. And so the Goonies references are just off the charts, and I absolutely love the Goonies. It is one of my favorite movies. It is incredible. I loved that movie ever since I was a little kid when I first saw it. It's utterly amazing, and I love that they make all these references to them. It's incredible. They come into contact with this girl, Eleven, and gradually discover that she has these powers, and that they need to do something about it to save her from the evil government men that are coming to chase after her. There's a heck of a lot of Stephen King stuff going on here, like with Firestarter, with these evil government men coming to chase down this young girl who has these magic abilities with her mind. And, you know, the entire series is just filled with references to things from the 80s. In fact, I'm kind of curious to see what people who are much younger than I am, who are maybe in their teens and are, you know, have not experienced those movies, and how they feel about all this. I suppose there could be a criticism made that they're just kind of ripping off those things from the past, but I don't care. Those things were so good, I want to see them replicated, and I don't mind that they're just sort of, it feels like they are paying homage to them, not ripping them off, and it just feels great. In fact, another incredible homage is the fact that one of the main characters, the town sheriff, is named Jim Hopper. Which, if you're someone like me who's obsessively watched the Arnold Schwarzenegger film Predator from 1987, and has seen it dozens of times over the years, or recognizes as a reference to a character that was killed by the Predator in that movie. And there are all of these kind of little sprinkles put out there throughout the series, and I just love picking up on them. There are references to John Carpenter's The Thing. The entire series kind of feels like the movie Aliens repeatedly. The monsters that they fight have a little bit of an H.R. Giger kind of alien feel to them, although not nearly as good and well done, but still, it's definitely got that feel to it. There are constant references to Dungeons and Dragons, and I love that, and hearing about the mind flayers and the astral plane, and just all of that stuff is just, it really tickles me. And, I mean, I don't know how you'd feel if you're not a nerd and not really into that stuff, but because I am, I absolutely adore this. Maybe you wouldn't like it if you're not into that, but if you are and you like all of these 80s action films and all of that, you're really going to get into this. Eventually, after discovering this young girl, one of the members of the group, Will Byers, is sucked into the other realm in the first season and spends most of it trapped there, and they have to try to find him. He can sort of communicate with the real world, with his mother using these lights, with some sort of strange power of his, and eventually they have to figure out a way to get him out of there and make sure that they don't get killed by anything that crosses over to our world in the process. Upside Down is a weird, monstrous place. It is dark and crumbling. It's sort of like the real world, but in ruins or decay all around it. A little bit like Silent Hill in that regard. And there are hideous alien beings living there that have a, sort of a Cthulhu-ish bent, and these monsters run around and they terrorize the kids, and the government agents are trying to fight back against them and close the door to this other realm. Everything about this is amazing. David Harbour, the actor that plays the Sheriff Jim Hopper, he's incredible in this. Winona Ryder, another throwback to my childhood in the 80s and early 90s, is Joyce Byers, the mother of Will, the kid that gets sucked into the other realm, and she's amazing in this. You really feel that she's this mother that's looking out for her kid, and really feel that she, get the sense that she cares about him, and she just does an incredible job. She's funny, and it's poignant when she's sad that her son is gone, and she is so energized and interested in finding him and protecting him. She's incredible. And I really have to point out that the child actors in this show are magnificent. I don't know how many child actors I've seen in my life that are just horrible. They're just terrible at their job, and they drag down and destroy a movie. And in fact, a number of Stephen King movies that this show is directly based off had terrible child actors in them. It's awful. They're unwatchable. But in this show, they're magnificent. I don't know how they learned this as kids. It's wonderful. The sort of camaraderie between the four friends is magnificent, and when they bring Elle into their group, it's incredible. You really feel that these guys actually are friends. They talk to each other as if they're actual people sticking together, fighting back against the bullies and obsessing over nerd stuff. It seems absolutely realistic, and I love it. It really helps to sell the world. In fact, everything about this really, really works. There's no missteps. They don't stumble on any problems of interpretation. They had a vision and they perfectly enacted it, and I absolutely loved it. Now into the second season, which came out in 2017, I thought it was fantastic. Some people I heard didn't like it as much, but I thought it was more of the same, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's incredible. I enjoyed seeing the characters go through this slightly different story arc where they have to fight back against the growing horde of monsters that are trying to cross over from the other side. And they even bring in Paul Reiser, who played the probably the greatest corporate scumbag character in cinematic history in the 1986 film Aliens. The sleaziest person in any movie ever. It was that guy. He is the greasiest, sleazy slime ball you could imagine. And they actually kind of flipped that in the second season and kind of make him turn out to be a good guy, which I really enjoyed. I thought they were kind of setting that up, playing on the memories of people like me who know Aliens so well and feeling that this guy has to be evil, but then they switch it around on you, and he turns out to be kind of nice, and I think that works out really, really well. The music of the series is excellent. I really enjoyed just the regular soundtrack because it has a very John Carpenter kind of feel with these old-fashioned synthesizer sounds to it. Most of the time I just skip the introductions of most TV shows on Netflix. Even if I like the show, I just skip that intro. But not this one. I like sitting there and listening to it. It really kind of draws me into everything. If I can offer any criticisms to the series, I really can't think of any. Pretty much the entire series is excellent. The only minor thing I could say is that it has something more to do with the marketing of the show than anything else. It really feels like it was heavily marketed as this 80s nostalgia where you're going back and listening to rockin' 80s songs. And isn't this so incredibly 80s? And, I love that it's set in that time period, but a fair amount of the things that it makes it feel like it's not actually from that time period. The way that the kids act with one another, they're a little bit more aggressive and they swear quite a bit. They don't quite sound like they're the more naive kids back in the 1980s. They sound much more like they're, internet age, more savvy children of nowadays. They even talk back to their parents and swear around them, which you never would have been able to do back then without, getting in serious trouble. The main character of Jim Hopper, as great as he is, he's kind of this like burned out, I'm so done with this kind of guy with this scraggly beard, and he drinks, and he just seems kind of like exhausted with the BS of the world. And that character really feels like he's from the 2010s. He feels like he's from 2016, not from 1983. That character doesn't feel like he exists back then, and part of me thinks that the story easily just could have been set in modern times, and it doesn't have to be set in the 1980s. Some people said that the second season felt like kind of a retread of the first, but I was too far into the series by that point. I just didn't care. I had tons of Stranger Things, and I wanted even more of it. This series, if you haven't checked it out, highly recommend that you check it out. I know I waited a year to check it out, which was a stupid thing to do, and I should have just checked it out immediately when I heard about it. It is as amazing as the hype makes it seem. It's absolutely incredible. The characters are wonderful. The acting is great. The monsters, unfortunately, most of the time they're CGI monsters and they look horrible, and that really draws me out of the 80s kind of feel. In fact, the cinematography and camera work actually do that too. So it's not a perfect replica of the 1980s, but the monsters are still pretty scary, and the story is wonderful, and it feels like a sort of a warm blanket of nostalgia of Stephen King and John Carpenter and all of these things from the 80s and 90s that someone like me grew up with. And if you haven't checked it out, highly recommend that you do. Please tell me in the comments below what you thought of the series, if you've seen it, if you plan on seeing it, if you think it's any good, if you dislike it, and why. I'm really interested because I love it so much. I want to hear your reasoning on that. And like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more content about movies and television and video games that I'm going to be going into. And yeah, thank you very much, and have a good day.